What happened to Poco? After Neil Young and Stephen Stills left Buffalo Springfield in 1968, Richie Furay and Jim Messina completed the group's final album Last Time Around with Rusty Young on steel guitar. Young stayed with Furay and Messina, skipping an audition for Graham Parsons' new band. They formed a new group with George Grantham and Randy Meisner, initially called Pogo, but changed it to Poco after a lawsuit from the comic strip creator. Poco's lineup rehearsed for 4 months and debuted in November 1968. Although they impressed audiences, securing a recording contract was complicated by Messina and Furay's ties to Atlantic Records. David Geffen negotiated a trade of their contracts to Columbia Records in exchange for Crosby and Nash moving to Atlantic. Poco faced lineup issues when Meisner left during the recording of their debut album, picking up the pieces due to disputes over mixing. The album, released in June 1969, received positive reviews but modest sales. Poco were back to a quintet in 1970 with the addition of bassist and vocalist Timothy B. Schmidt, whose arrival coincided with the recording of their second album, Poco, on which he had 2 co-writing credits. It wasn't long after that Messina decided to leave, feeling that Furay had started to exert too much control over the group's sound. Before departing, however, he secured the services of a more than capable replacement member, guitarist and singer Paul Cotton, a one-time member of the country band Illinois Speed Press, who had recorded with Epic. Messina also played on and produced their subsequent live album, Delivering. The latter represented an interesting change in strategy for the label and the band, which after 2 artistically successful but commercially disappointing albums, was now looking to present itself in the strongest light possible. Messina would end up forming the band Loggins and Messina, which had success for most of the 1970s. A live album consisting entirely of new material, Delivering, offered the record-buying public a glimpse of the group's onstage sound, which melded the excitement and energy of rock and roll with the lyrics and romanticism of country music. It seemed to work to a degree. The album reached number 26 and yielded a minor hit in Come On. Messina's departure left Poco in need of a producer, and for their next album, From the Inside, from 1971, they turned to Booker T and the MG's guitarist Steve Cropper, who was an experienced producer but one mostly associated with Southern soul. The lineup of Furay, Cotton, Young, Schmidt, and Grantham and Poco managed to stay together for more than one studio album. They centered their next release around Furay's popular concert song, A Good Feeling to Know, but the album and single didn't achieve significant commercial success. Disheartened, Furay planned to leave the band. Poco's next effort, Crazy Eyes, released in late 1973, became their most successful album, peaking at number 38. However, Furay left the band to form the Souther Hillman Furay Band. Despite predictions of Poco's demise, they continued as a quartet. Their subsequent album, 7 from 1974, maintained fan interest but didn't match Crazy Eyes in success. Cantamos, released in 1974, reached number 76 on the Billboard 200. This album, the first they produced themselves, featured strong songwriting and harmonizing, mainly from Rusty Young and Timothy B. Schmidt. Poco signed with ABC Records in 1975, and their first album for the new label, Head Over Heels, from 1975, surpassed the sales of any of their then recent Epic releases, climbing to number 48, and also generated a moderately successful single in Keep On Trying, which reached number 50 on the Billboard chart. The album's performance was all the more impressive given that Epic issued a double LP compilation, The Very Best of Poco, just 2 weeks after Head Over Heels came out. That compilation reached number 90, which was probably just enough to cost Head Over Heels a notch or two on its own chart placement, competing for the attention of the fans. Rose of Cimarron from 1976 offered a gorgeous title track by Rusty Young with a melody that was almost impossible not to keep humming once heard, and as high a haunt count as anything the group had ever released. The song was later covered by Emmylou Harris and turned into the de facto title track of her Cimarron album, and was also included on her Songs of the West compilation in the 1990s. The Poco album only reached number 89, and their single release of the track just made the top 50 before disappearing. The album's release was complicated, as was its predecessor, by Epic's issue of another catalog item, this time a previously unreleased concert recording live just a couple months before. The group came close to splitting up at the time, and new member Al Garth, who had previously played with Loggins and Messina, did exit the lineup midway through the year. In the spring of 1977, Poco released Indian Summer, which fortunately did somewhat better than its predecessor, peaking at number 57 on the Billboard 200. But those and other then recent releases were not the kind of numbers that allow a band to long sustain itself, except through a lot of hard work and extensive touring, and even the most enthusiastic musicians after a few years of that pace can feel as though they're on a career treadmill. 4 months after Indian Summer's release, it was Timothy B. Schmidt's turn to leave. His exit took place under more amicable circumstances. He was as happy in the group as anyone, and had hung in there longer than anyone except Young and Grantham, and they were all having to work a little too hard to sell fewer records than their music merited, and definitely harder than they might have liked after a decade just to sustain what momentum they had, but he might well have stayed for the long haul. That summer, however, lightning suddenly struck his career from an unexpected location. Long ago departed Poco co-founder Randy Meisner, who had been with the Eagles from the beginning of their history, had quit the latter group just as they were riding a wave of mega platinum sales and the kind of top-ticket, top-of-the-bill arena-scale bookings that most bands can only dream of. And just how it happened when Meisner quit Poco in 1969, Schmidt was offered his bassist and vocalist spot in the Eagles, and not as a hired musician, which would have been the usual approach made to a potential replacement member, but with a full share in a group that was counting both its annual album sales and concert earnings in the millions. The other members of Poco not only didn't try to dissuade him, but actively encouraged him to accept the offer, which he did. And as of the recording of this video in July 2024, Timothy B. Schmidt is still in the Eagles and is still touring with them all these decades later. Grantham, who had been in the band longer than anyone still there except Rusty Young, left in January of 1978, with him later joining Ricky Skaggs' band. Meanwhile, Poco reformed with two British musicians, bassist-singer Charlie Harrison and drummer Steve Chapman joining Young and Cotton. Kim Bullard, a Crosby, Stills and Nash alumnus, came in on keyboards in December of that year, and Poco were once again a quintet. All of these personnel changes seem to have done the trick because their next album, Legend, released late in 1978, became their best-selling LP in their history, earning a gold record in the course of rising to number 14. The lead single, the song Crazy Love, became their biggest hit ever, reaching number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart. And it was nearly matched by Cotton's Heart of the Night, one of the most beautiful songs in the group's history, which got to number 20 in the summer of 1979. Unfortunately, the group was never able to replicate that sudden flash of success at the end of the 70s. Their next album, Under the Gun from 1980, was perhaps too accurate in its title, reflecting the sudden pressure they were under to recreate the hit status of Legend. Poco's Blue and Gray from 1981, a Civil War themed concept album, and Cowboys and Englishmen from 1982, a release aimed at fulfilling their contract with MCA Records, both failed to gain traction. Their last three albums each performed worse than the previous one, revealing issues beyond just lack of inspiration or time. By the early 80s, a generational shift in music, marked by the rise of post-punk and new wave bands, left veteran acts like Poco behind. The new generation excelled in music video marketing, crucial with the advent of MTV, further sidelining older bands whose audience was already aging. In the midst of this transition and a jump to Atlantic Records, the group issued Ghost Town in late 1982. It was superior to at least two of their three preceding albums, with some beautiful melodies and playing, but it peaked at number 195. In 1984, the group seemed to turn backward for the first time in its history as Furay and Schmidt came back aboard as guest artists for their next album, Inamorata, which scarcely made any impact. Amid various lineup shifts, Poco continued to tour sporadically over the next 5 years. Then, in 1989, came one of the more unexpected turns in the band's history. Furay, Messina, Young, Grantham, and Meisner, who had last worked together in 1968, reunited and began recording and touring together as Poco. Their comeback single, Call It Love, hit the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100, accompanied by the album Legacy, which made it to number 40 on the Billboard 200. Despite lineup changes after the 1968 tour, Poco continued under the leadership of Rusty Young and Paul Cotton, with George Grantham rejoining for a period. The band faced difficulties securing record deals in the 1990s, but released Running Horse in 2002 and The Last Roundup in 2004. Grantham remained until a stroke in 2004. The band released several live albums, including Keeping the Legend Alive from 2004, Bareback at Big Sky in 2005, Keep on Trying, Alive in the Heart of the Night from 2006, and the Wildwood Tapes from 2007. By 2007, Poco's lineup included Rusty Young, Paul Cotton, Jack Sundrud, and George Lawrence. Paul Cotton left in 2010 and was replaced by Michael Webb. The band recorded All Fired Up in 2013, their first studio album since 2002. Crazy Love, a live album, followed in 2014. Rusty Young retired from touring in 2014 and passed away on April 14, 2021. Paul Cotton died shortly after on August 1, 2021. Unfortunately, Randy Meisner passed away on July 26, 2023 at the age of 77. And that's what happened to Poco. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Give me some facts about Poco that I failed to mention in this video, and let me know who I should do next on the channel. If you enjoyed this video, I know you will enjoy the video I did on Randy Meisner. It should be on screen right now. And with that being said, thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.